Let me tell you what's next on the chopping block. Women's suffrage. Women's suffrage is on the chopping block. They want it overturned in their lifetime. I know the objection. Oh, that's in the Constitution. That will never happen. You do not understand how crafty and how motivated these people are. Don't forget, they pushed for almost 50 years to overturn Roe v. Wade. 50 years, and they did.
And welcome to the PoliticsGirl podcast. I'm your host, Lee McGowan. Let's get into it. Well, we are now 2 weeks into a war, and we have yet to settle on a reason why we're there. Nuclear weapons, which we said we destroyed last summer to help free the people of Iran, which seems unlikely as we are currently destroying their country. Election interference, which we have no proof that they did, but gives our current government an excuse for them to interfere with our election infrastructure. Or maybe because Bibi Netanyahu has been trying to get America to attack Iran for 30 years and finally found a president willing to do his bidding. Maybe we just have a bunch of trigger-happy yahoos who like to spend money because they have it and they think it's fun to use these toys at their disposal. Any way you slice it, this is really bad. And we're seeing a ridiculous amount of destruction, not just in Iran, but in 16 countries around Iran. Our military bases in the Gulf are getting attacked. Our radar is down. We are losing $1 billion a day. And our government hasn't ruled out American boots on the ground in the Middle East or promised to keep us safe from domestic terror at home. One of the things that started to concern me last week was the amount of religious language and imagery that was coming out of our government. Reports that some of the commanders in the U.S. military were telling soldiers they were being sent into war because Trump was anointed by Jesus to cause Armageddon and mark Jesus' return. That we were essentially in a holy war, and everything that was happening now was God's plan for the end times. So with that in mind, I invited my friend Tim Whitaker, a former Christian fundamentalist and founder of the New Evangelicals, to talk to us today about the sway and control the evangelical Christian community has on our government and what he believes is going on. As a former Christian fundamentalist himself, a man baptized and raised in the heart of this group that's trying to take over America, Tim understands the mindset at play here and has spent years deconstructing what he learned to not just continue living his faith, but to advocate for systemic change within the church. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, educator, influencer, and former evangelical Christian trying to create his own new thing, Tim Whitaker. Welcome back, Tim.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's so good to see you again.
Oh, it's so nice to have you. I mean, honestly, as I was listening to people talk about this war in the Middle East, last week they were talking about it being a holy war and God's plan. And I thought, I have to get you on here to talk to me about this. So thanks for taking the time to join me.
Yeah, for sure.
So listen, here's the thing. When I talked to you earlier, we were talking about this thing where the Military Independent Freedom Foundation, which is a nonprofit government watchdog agency, had been reporting that they had received over 200 reports from military service members that their commanders had been invoking this extremist Christian prophecy as a justification for this war in Iran, including one report that said a commander told his troops that Donald Trump was anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his return to earth. And when I originally spoke to you about that, you were like, I'm not exactly sure if that's what's happening here. I'm hesitant to just go forward on those claims. Where do you sit on that now?
Two things can be true at the same time. I can say, I'm not sure about that specific story, if that really happened. As of right now, it only has one main source, but that's fine because anyone who grew up like I did in evangelicalism heard that kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah,
so,
right.
It doesn't have to be true in this one instance for it not to be true at all, right? There's a whole world of evangelical Christians who believe this stuff, who do believe that the more wars that happen in the Middle East, the closer we are to what's called the rapture, which means the closer we are to the return of Christ. So this is a widely held belief in many evangelical spaces today. No problem.
Right. With that in mind, I was recently reading about Christian Zionism. We know Zionism is like, yes, I believe Israel should exist, or yes, I am pro the Jewish people, but people get very confused about what it means. There is something called Christian Zionism, which is a specific Christian belief that Jewish people must occupy the Holy Land to rebuild Solomon's temple in Jerusalem to kickstart the second coming of Christ, which is why it's really essential that God's faithful Christians support Israel in order to facilitate the second coming. So if Iran is Israel's biggest enemy to the Christian Zionists, then they can claim this war is ordained by God because it protects his people, which in that context is the Jewish people. But the Jewish people themselves are just, as I understand it, a means to an end for the Christian Zionists, because in their mind, Jewish people are supposed to either convert to Christianity or die in that final holy war, or both, before the prophecy is fulfilled. So Christian Zionists are basically what people often refer to as a death cult, who want to bring about Armageddon, as somebody said, by packing enough Jewish people into one place as a sacrifice to summon God. Does that seem real to you?
Fact checked, true for many Christian nationalists. Not all. There's a rift here, but there definitely is. The technical term is called dispensationalism. That's the fancy term for this.
Okay.
And it ties directly into the modern Christian Zionist attitude. The TLDR pretty much goes something like this. In the Bible, in Genesis 12:3, Abram is told by God that whoever blesses Abram, which is the father of the Jewish people in the Bible, God says, whoever blesses you, I will bless. Whoever curses you, I will curse. People like Mike Huckabee, ambassador to Israel, is also a Christian Zionist. They hang on that phrase and go, therefore, because we believe that ancient Israel is the same thing as today's modern Israel, we have to bless, aka support Israel no matter what, or else God will curse us. And also, God has a special plan for the Jewish people, and that means returning to their homeland and certain other prophecies being fulfilled that then usher in the end. To your point, though, this belief is inherently anti-Semitic, because at the end of time, the Jewish people are either erased as a people and convert to this version of Christianity, or they are slaughtered in the war and end up burning in hell forever because they're not true Christians. So yes, that's what you just said is completely correct.
Yeah, and it's a trip, because I think there's quite a few Americans who believe any war in the Middle East is good for them, which seems like problematic for the people in the Middle East at the very least.
You would think, yeah.
Talk to me about the end times, right? Because when these extremists talk about the end times, which I'm hearing about more and more, what exactly does that mean? Because you mentioned the rapture, right? So the rapture is, as I understand it, like the chosen ones are taken up by God and the rest of us are sort of left here to, die, or where the real Christians and true believers who are now living in heaven or utopia, or are the real Christians and true believers left to lead the world because of their faith? Like, what is the end game of the end times?
Well, like anything, it's complicated, and there are people who believe all different variations of this. But here's the rule of thumb you need to understand. This term, like I said, dispensationalism, it actually was invented in recent history, the 1800s, by a guy named John Nelson Darby, who, by the way, fell off his horse and hit his head, FYI. But he essentially posits that God works uniquely in different ages of history, aka dispensations. There are 7 of them. And we are currently in the second to last one. We are in the 6th dispensation, the age of the church. The next dispensation that we're on the cusp on is the tribulation, is the rapture. And for that to happen, certain prophecies must be fulfilled. All right. These dispensationalists are always looking for prophecy to be fulfilled. A big one was 1948, when the nation state of Israel was formed. That for them, that was, oh my God, we are imminent. We are any day now. This rapture could happen. Okay. The rapture is what you just said. At any moment, with the snap of the finger, half of humanity, or whoever is truly saved, will just vanish. And then what's called the tribulation will happen. This is 7 years of chaos. It's war. It's carnage. God's pouring out his wrath on people. Now, here's a key piece that people don't understand, because you and I have talked about this. How do Christian nationalists worship a Jesus that's so opposite of the red letters in the Bible? Here's how. They appeal to a verse or a passage in Revelation where, in their interpretation, Christ comes back not as the love your enemy Jesus, but as the kill my enemy Jesus.
Like the Old Testament God.
Yes, he will come down, smite his enemies. There's a verse that essentially says his cloak will be dipped in the blood of his enemies. It's in Revelation. Again, symbolic, but these people take it literally. They believe Christ will come back to slaughter people. And then from there, Armageddon will happen. Then this 1,000-year reign of Christ will happen. Then after that, the end will happen. They are looking for it. They are giddy for it. So every time a war in the Middle East breaks out with the U.S. and Israel being involved, they look to that as a sign that we are closer and closer to this moment when pure chaos is going to ensue.
Okay. And then I want to clarify too, because this is often this prophesied Armageddon is often attributed to the book of Revelations. But
That's
you
right.
said it actually comes from this guy who fell off his horse and hit his head. And I would say this popular fictional book series called Left Behind.
Yeah, so the Left Behind series, anyone who knows that series and just heard it just got chills down their spine. But yeah, it's essentially this fictional account of what the rapture and tribulation will look like that people sold to their kids as a reality that will happen eventually. So you're just living in fear that either you weren't really a Christian and you'll be left behind to be judged, or at any moment you're just going to disappear. You're just going to disappear. Now, you're right. This theology is not historic. People who preach this stuff will tell you they're just reading the Bible plainly. That's not true at all. They have a shitty interpretive lens that the overwhelming consensus of biblical scholarship rejects. They essentially appeal to some passages in the book of Daniel and passages in the book of Revelation, and they interpret these prophecies as yet to be fulfilled events. It's horrific. It's not correct. It's wrong, frankly. But this guy named John Nelson Darby, he's the person who developed this way of understanding the Bible that we're all now living in the consequences of.
And then as you said, Mike Huckabee is involved in this, and Mike Huckabee is a Christian Zionist, and Mike Huckabee is now the ambassador to Israel. And I saw Mike Huckabee recently in I believe it was a 60 Minutes interview, and he was basically saying, it's not just Gaza. If Israel wants all of the Middle East, they should have it,
That's
and
right.
literally days later, America was bombing one of Israel's biggest enemies unprovoked. So in your mind, does this appear to be religious, or is it a secular power grab? Or is it just like a bunch of world leaders who really should be in jail using religion and power to get rich and stay in power? Do they really believe this is God's plan, or is this man's plan for dominance with God as an excuse? Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. There are these people called data brokers who profit off your data. That is everything from your name and contact information to your social security number and home address. They can even get information about your family members, compile it, and then sell it online. This is what leads to theft and phishing attempts and harassment, but you can protect your privacy with Delete Me. I've been using Delete Me for well over a year because I'm someone with a very active online presence, but anyone can be a victim of identity theft or harassment or doxing. It is something we all have to think about these days. So take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me now at a special discount for our listeners. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/politicsgirl and use the promo code politicsgirl at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/politicsgirl and enter the code politicsgirl at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/politicsgirl. Code politicsgirl. This year, I'm all about quality over quantity, especially in my closet. If it's not well made or versatile, it's not worth buying. In fact, I have a very hard time even shopping right now because the shopping feels vapid in these troubled times. But that's why I like Quince. The fabrics are elevated, the cuts are thoughtful, and the pricing just makes sense. Quince makes high-quality wardrobe staples using premium fabrics like 100% European linen, 100% silk, 100% cashmere, and organic cotton poplin. They work with safe, ethical factories that cut out the middleman, so you're not paying for a brand markup or a fancy retail store. It's just quality clothing that holds up season after season. The stitching, the fit, the fabrics. These are clothes that you can wear over and over while still looking good. Which is why Quince's clothing is consistently rated 4.5 to 5 stars by their thousands of customers. These are real people wearing their pieces. I have genuinely worn their navy blue boat neck cashmere sweater from Quince for over 2 years. And it still looks amazing. It's not at all pilled up or out of shape. It's light for layering, warm when you need it to be, and it did not cost what quality cashmere normally would. So be smart in these weird times. Build the wardrobe you actually want that's responsible, affordable, and lasting. Right now, go to quince.com/politicsgirl for free shipping and 365 days of returns. That's a full year to wear it and love it. And you will. Now available in Canada too. Don't keep settling for clothes that don't last. We cannot do that anymore. Go to quince.com/politicsgirl for free shipping and 365 days of returns. Quince.com/politicsgirl. Do they really believe this is God's plan, or is this man's plan for dominance with God as an excuse?
Well, I think all of the above. One thing that's nice about being progressive is that we can hold many truths at the same time, right? So are there economic advantages for the military industrial war complex to do this? Yes, obviously, right? Are there people in the government who believe that we're on the verge of the rapture and that wars in the Middle East and protecting the nation state of Israel at all costs is part of their obligation on earth? And the U.S. government should be doing that? Yes. Do some people not give a shit about that and just want power, like the guy who's currently running our country? Yeah. So everything can be true at the same time, which is what makes it complicated because all those narratives run congruent with each other, right? But make no mistake, Christian Zionism has, in my opinion, been one of the largest factors, most influential factors that has shaped U.S. policy when it comes to Israel. John Hagee is kind of the father of the modern Christian Zionist movement. He's a megachurch pastor. He's been doing this for almost 7 decades now. The Sunday after Iran was bombed, he dropped this video before he preached talking about all this end time stuff because he's been one of the biggest proponents of it. There's a huge incentive here, and these people really do believe it. They really believe that every time this happens, we're closer and closer to the end. So they call it the war to end all wars. And they ask that question, is this the war to end all wars? Is this the time when Christ comes back? But to your point, and this is really key, this is such a pro-death ethic, right? Yeah. It's not a pro-life ethic. These are people who celebrate children being bombed by U.S. missiles in Iran because their version of the end times and their God needs that apparently in order to come back and fix the earth, which makes no sense when you think about it, right? And we also know if the shoe was on the other foot, if Iran had a policy where they believed that they had to bomb the U.S. to usher in the return of their God, right? I don't think John Hagee or Mike Huckabee or Josh Howard's another one, another megachurch pastor who believes this stuff. I don't think they'd be like, hey guys, it's prophecy. We just got to deal with it. It's what God would want. So it always comes down to power and control, right? That's what it always comes down to. But I do believe many of these pastors are very sincere in this belief.
So that would explain why I'm seeing all these evangelicals and followers of evangelicals who, honest to God, look like me, like white ladies standing on their couch, lip syncing to I am, a soldier in the war, whatever that song is.
I'm in the Lord's army.
There we go. And, and they're kind of cheering the deaths in the Middle East because they believe that this is the way that Jesus comes back. And I find it so alarming because, as you were saying, it's basically like the opposite of what Jesus would stand for. And it's a creepy thing to watch because it just feels like these people who are supposed to be following, do unto others as you would do unto you, and, bring me your poor and bring me the little children, and this kindness doctrine and the things that come from the Beatitudes are literally dancing and singing to the death of people in another country.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big reason why the U.S. has sponsored Israel's genocide in Palestine as well, because this is their land and those people are just the enemies of God. I really can't express enough how much this theology shapes U.S. foreign policy for the Middle East and how deadly it is, right? The bad theology kills. Bad theology kills people. And it's a certain kind of brainwashing that I grew up with, that I believed, where I really thought I was on God's side. And those people over there were just expendable. They were just in the way for God to fulfill his plan on earth, right? So come, Lord Jesus, come, because I know where I'm going when I die. Again, I don't care if you believe this, but when you start shaping U.S. foreign policy by it, when you start killing other people in other countries because of it, then we have a major problem on our hands.
Yeah, it's a major problem. It's also a complete flagrant violation of the separation of church and state, right? Everything that we claim to stand for. And I have to say, we're in this position now, as you're saying, that we can't ignore how many people at the highest level of the American government, be that the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, to, as we're saying, the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, to cabinet members and congressional Republicans and White House leaders like Russell Vought, who's, doing all of Project 2025, even to a majority of justices on the Supreme Court who are far right Catholics, are far right Christians, right? That is everything from far right Catholics to evangelicals to Christian nationalists, and how much that is deeply affecting this administration and dictating their decisions.
That is correct. This is where it gets a tad bit tricky here. So This belief I just outlined of the rapture is not monolithically held in Christian nationalist spaces. And I'll give you a great example of this. Think Paula White. She believes this stuff. She comes more from the charismatic side of all this, speaking in tongues, prophecy. People who are more charismatic tend to be dispensationalists or Christian Zionists, rule of thumb.
If you don't know who Paula White is, she is the spiritual leader of the White House right now. She's the blonde lady that often speaks in tongues and always has her hand on Donald Trump's shoulder or head.
Yes, and she went viral for calling angels from Africa during the last election results, right? Yeah, she's great. So then you have someone like Doug Wilson. Doug Wilson, I'm sure you know who he is. He went, viral on CNN for saying women are the kind of people that babies come from and wants the 19th Amendment repealed. Okay. He's a Christian nationalist, but he does not believe this version of events. He rejects dispensationalism. And the technical term, this sounds so weird saying it to a non-Christian audience, is called post-millennialism. And here's the basic difference. I'll make it really, really simple. People like Doug Wilson believe that they have to Christianize the entire world for Christ to come back. Dispensationalists, like your Paula Whites and your rapture people, believe that the world will get worse and worse until the rapture happens and then Christ comes back. So they have different ideas of how this all happens, okay? But they still believe in the same thing. Power and control, come Lord Jesus, come. It's just a matter of how we decide to do it. So Doug Wilson is not going to adhere to this version of events. And that also is why he's not nearly as outspoken on America supporting Israel blindly. Okay. In fact, there's insider baseball here. There's a pretty big rift happening inside of the MAGA space along the Israel support lines, where you have Christian Zionist charismatic pastors who are like, how could we not support Israel? Then you have this other group that's a little more along like the Nick Fuentes kind of vibe, a little more of like, we don't think Israel's God's chosen people anymore kind of vibe. And they are much more critical of Israel. And that's creating a huge rift. So that is happening at the same time.
The point would be, these people aren't fringe anymore, right? These are the decision makers. These are the people at the highest levels of government, the highest levels of right-wing social media. These are the people that have the ear of the president. And to be extremely clear, the president himself is not a religious man. He is happy to use people of faith and the grifters that surround them as a stepping stone to power. But these religious people, be it whatever side they're on, are the true believers. And they have calculated a very rigid plan for the country and the world, honestly, that really only seems to include good things for themselves to the detriment of the rest of us.
Well, you're 100% right. I mean, again, they have different views of the end times, so they're not going to fight over it. They both have access to power, right? Doug Wilson disciples Pete Hegseth. Doug Wilson just spoke at a chapel service in the Pentagon because of Pete Hegseth, right? Paula White has the ear of the president. They're not going to fight over whose, the term is called eschatology, end times thinking. They're not going to fight over whose eschatology is correct because it both gives them power and control. Paula White has access to power and control. Doug Wilson has access to power and control. They both want to make America a Christian nation. They both believe that God is doing miraculous things through the nations and that they have an obligation to Christianize people. How it gets done and how it happens, whatever. Who cares about that? They definitely agree on these things for sure.
All right, well, let's talk about Pete Hegseth and Doug Wilson then. Pete Hegseth is the head of the Department of War. He has, as far as I'm concerned, Pete Hegseth is a complete degenerate.
Cosign.
He's also a religious zealot. He has a Crusades tattoo on his chest. He is devoted, as far as I can see, to Doug Wilson, who is the leader of his church. And we should point out to people, if you don't know Doug Wilson, he's very anti-LGBTQ. He does not believe in women voting. He pretty much said slavery had some good things about it. Doug Wilson is also the figurehead for all these Theo bros that are out there. All these guys we see online, like, I don't know, Joel Webbin, who have taken the far right space and are working to change the culture to the religious right, while the government is looking to change the culture through laws. And I would say a big player in that space, the Theobro space, is also our Vice President, J.D. Vance. So what should we be looking out for to fight back against this very clear war that is unfolding, not only on real battlefields in the Middle East, but here on social media at home? Okay, so for the amount of people who see me in my kitchen and tell me to go make them a sandwich, the truth is I'm actually a pretty good cook. I make a mean lasagna that's absolutely delicious, but it takes about 4 hours, and I never have the time to do that anymore. In fact, I rarely have the time to cook at all these days, so I use a lot of meal systems that help me serve my family fresh and healthy food without me having to think or shop. One of the services I am particularly fond of is Cook Unity, which is chef-crafted meals delivered right to your door. The meals are fully cooked, so you can heat them up in as little as 5 minutes. You choose from a rotating seasonal menu of over 300 meals, or if that sounds like too much work, you can let Cook Unity provide recommendations. There are over 25 diets and cuisines that you can match your food with your wellness goals. Chefs include Food Network alumni, James Beard Award winners, acclaimed restaurateurs, and all the meals are small batch, delivered fresh and not frozen to your home. Cook Unity is a commitment-free subscription that starts as low as $11 a meal, and you can skip deliveries, pause, or cancel anytime. Now look, I love my lasagna, but honestly, I do not have the time to make it. And with everyone in my family trying to lose weight, it's really nice to be able to put your dietary needs into their algorithm with your protein requirements, or even filter down to your macros. So consider enjoying the comfort and craftsmanship of the award-winning chefs behind Cook Unity. Go to cookunity.com/politicsgirl or enter the code PoliticsGirl before checkout to get 50% off your first order. That's 50% off your first order by using the code PoliticsGirl or going to cookunity.com/politicsgirl. As they say, cooking quality food takes time. It just doesn't have to be your time. So our friend's son just got a new apartment in New York, and I am not going to lie to you, it is very nice. Like, I think it might be nicer than our house. But it currently doesn't have any window coverings, just lots and lots of windows in an empty space. I told my friend that they needed to call 3-Day Blinds because her son doesn't have time to spend wandering around blind stores when 3-Day Blinds will bring the entire showroom to him. We shop for everything at home these days, so why not blinds? 3-Day Blinds sends a professionally trained design consultant with 10 plus years of experience to your home to give you expert guidance. You just set up the appointment and you will get a free, no obligation quote the same day. And if you're not very handy, the team at 3-Day Blinds will also do all the measuring and installing, so you can just relax and leave it to the pros. Maybe my friend's son wants smart blinds that connect to his phone, or blackout shades for his bedroom, or just nice soft curtains in the living room, so he gets the views but the windows feel finished. 3-Day Blinds has thousands of options that fit any budget or style. They've been in business for over 45 years and have helped more than 2 million people get the window treatments of their dreams. This is a brand you can trust. Right now, you can get quality window treatments to fit your budget with 3-Day Blinds by heading to 3dayblinds.com/politicsgirl for their buy one, get one 50% off deal on custom blinds, shades, shutters, and drapery. For a free, no charge, no obligation consultation, just head to 3dayblinds.com/politicsgirl. One more time, that is buy one, get one 50% off when you head to the number 3, DAY, blinds.com/politicsgirl. What should we be looking out for to fight back against this very clear war that is unfolding not only on real battlefields in the Middle East, but here on social media at home?
I want to correct you on one minor thing. He didn't just downplay slavery. Doug Wilson said that there has never been a more racially harmonious society when we had slavery. Okay, there's a quote I could read for you if you wanted me to that is so appalling, your jaw would drop, from a book he wrote in 1996 with another white supremacist named Steve Wilkinson, who co-wrote The League of the South. He wrote a book called Slavery as It Was, and he literally says that slavery was to the slave quite beneficial in many cases, and that it was the gospel that united both freed and enslaved. And he says, by the way, that we should repeal the Civil Rights Act. When Jesse Jackson died last month, Doug Wilson on his podcast said the best thing, and I'm quoting Doug here, Doug said the best thing we can do for, quote, the blacks is to take away the Civil Rights Act and to overturn it. That's who Doug Wilson is. He disciples Pete Hegseth. They planted a church called Christ Church in DC. That's all Doug Wilson's world. Okay. So that's who we're talking about here. This is a man who is incredibly dangerous, right? And yes, to your point, you know, he is online. He has a lot of influence. There's a huge push to push people to the right farther and farther and farther, where really the hoods are off. They're just saying the quiet parts out loud now. There's no more dog whistling. They're just saying the quiet parts out loud. That's who's in control of the minds of so many people. And it's built on lost cause mythology. It's resurrecting all over again. It's the same ideology.
Like it was all better when it was top-down theology with white men on top. And we should go back to that because that's when the world was good.
And they always sanitize the language. He believes in the household vote. Households should vote. That's key for men make the decision and women just follow along, right? This is a man who in his lifetime wants Jesus Christ is Lord in the Constitution. Because again, his theology, what does it say? We have to Christianize the world for Christ to come back. So these people, I would say, On a numerical level, sure, yeah, they're fringe. But on access to power level, they are the majority. They are shaping the government. They are shaping its response to things. They have access to the levers of power, right? And they're killing people. We're sniping boats out of international waters every day for no reason other than these are vengeful people who want to kill others that are not like them. And I don't mean to sound so extreme, but that's the reality. That's the fruit of their words.
Yeah, we're seeing that on the streets with ICE as well.
Yes. I mean, another example to show people how tied in this stuff is. I'm sure you remember City's Church in Minnesota. That was a church that Don Lemon covered when it was protested, right? They had a pastor there who was also an ICE official. Well, that church was formed in part by a guy named Joe Rigney, who wrote the book, The Sin of Empathy, who's a Doug Wilson guy. He works with Doug Wilson. We're not sharing enough of how bad it really is. I hate to be the Debbie Downer here. It's worse than most people think.
Yeah, no, I mean, you and I have talked many times on this show about Christian nationalism and about the rise of these movements. And you were here last time warning us that this extremist Christian movement was such a threat to the country, that you knew firsthand the danger this group held for women, for minorities, for the marginalized, for democracy itself. That, you know, while these white Christian nationalists pitch themselves as the country's saviors from hedonism or whatever else they think, what they're really offering is top-down theology with them at the top. And that's exactly what we're seeing happen.
It was me and some others who said a couple of years ago, Obergefell is back on the table. We were poo-pooed online. That's so, even by progressives, that's so extreme. I'm like, you don't understand what you're dealing with here. And now there's a campaign out. There's a campaign out to overturn Obergefell with several major influencers, including Ali Stuckey, pushing a video out saying it's for the sake of the children.
Obergefell was the decision that made gay marriage legal.
Exactly right. So what's next then? Since I was right about that, let me tell you what's next on the chopping block. Women's suffrage. Women's suffrage is on the chopping block. They want it overturned in their lifetime. I know the objection. Oh, that's in the Constitution. That will never happen. You do not understand how crafty and how motivated these people are. Don't forget, they pushed for almost 50 years to overturn Roe v. Wade. 50 years. And they did. People said they could never get it done, and they got it done. They are like bloodhounds when it comes to this stuff. They are so committed to their positions. They will do whatever they can to make it a reality. So now is the time, man. Now is the time to be aware of this stuff. It's bad.
Yeah, no, it's really bad. And what they're trying to pitch right now is the SAVE Act. That's like a way to protect us, you know, from voter it's a voter protection law. It's a voter suppression law. And it starts with women. Women are the ones that are going to get really screwed by the SAVE Act because you have to have a passport. And if you don't have a passport, then you have to show some form of ID that matches your birth certificate. But most married women's ID does not match their birth certificate, which means you would then have to go get your marriage license. And the whole thing becomes a poll tax and very complicated. And if they change the rules, if they pass the SAVE Act in, say, September or October, we would never have enough time to get it done. The whole goal is to stop women's voices from counting, from mattering, and then they can eventually roll things back because it'd be a lot easier to roll back the 19th Amendment if there were less women voting in the first place, if we put less women in power, if women's voices no longer matter. And then we talk so much about the loneliness epidemic for men and how women have let down society and how the family is let down because women went to work and got educated. And you see the attempted rollback of all of those things and how deeply this Christian nationalist mentality is entrenched in today's Republican Party and in the legislation they're creating. We just had legislation that was saying that women should be put to death for having abortions. They tried to get that passed in, I'm not sure what state it was, Kansas? Oklahoma?
Well, and also there was a bill sponsored by Jeff Durbin, who's another big leader of what's called the abolitionist movement. They've hijacked the language of actual abolitionism and use it now for this radical, quote unquote, pro-life ethic that says abortion is murder. Therefore, whenever someone gets an abortion, we should treat them like a murderer, right? That's the logic. And they sponsored a bill, I think it was in North Carolina a few years ago, that did not pass, thankfully. But again, it's not about it not passing. They will try again and again and again. They're like waves against the shore. They're going to keep going. They're going to keep eroding piece by piece until they get what they want if they're not stopped. And that's why I say there is no negotiating with these people. And as someone who's very collaborative in my personal life, I like working together. I like compromise. I don't like being hardline. I don't say that lightly. You're dealing with people who think that Democrats are literally demonic, that women are ruining the country, and that they have a God-given right to take over. You can't negotiate with that. You can't compromise with that. You can only stand against it and eradicate it from politics. That's all you can do at this point.
And that's going to be difficult for us to do because, I mean, I recently saw a study from Axios that said that 56% of all Republicans adhere or sympathize with Christian nationalism. And we need to remember that Christian nationalism is basically the idea that we should be governed according to Christian values, particularly strict Christian values. And 56% is very high. So as someone that lived in that world, how do we counter that in a way that doesn't see someone like me back in a kitchen with my mouth sewed shut, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's even higher in white evangelicalism. It's 80% of white evangelicals hold Christian nationalist ideals. That's the hotbed of this stuff. Yeah. So what do you do? I mean, there's a couple of things. First off, and I know you and I probably agree on this, the Democratic Party has to shit or get off the pot. They need to realize what they're actually dealing with here. One of my biggest wake-up moments was watching the Senate try to confirm Pete Hegseth, and not one Democrat asked him about his ties to Doug Wilson. I was like, guys, how do you not know? This is so clear. How do you not know this, right? I think we need to have a party that has a spine, whether that's the Working Families Party or a legit, populist leftist movement, whatever it might be. We have to think about how do we fight this stuff at the ballot box and with politicians who will have a spine. The other thing that's really important is local communities. What are you doing in your local area? Who's running for school board? Are you raising radically empathetic kids, right? That kind of stuff matters. Small communities are really important to changing society. And I think that's something all of us can do in our own little bubbles, whether it's being nice to our neighbors or whether it's, being more involved in our schools or in local politics or just volunteering, right? Just being out there, I think is a huge part of this. And the last thing I'll say is, unfortunately, it's easier for me to say because I grew up in this, but unfortunately, people who did not grow up like me have to get educated on Christian nationalism and where it comes from and how it works, because it is not super clear. It's kind of sneaky. It's kind of complicated. There's competing factions, even though they're all working together to go in one direction. And the more you know that, the more you can spot it, especially in right-wing media. And that's really important.
Yeah, I think that is really important because it really is quite pervasive in right-wing media. And I think you and I have always agreed that Christian nationalism has very little to do with actual Christianity, right? That in many ways it's a power structure rather than a faith structure. And in many ways, you also mentioned that like 80% of white evangelicals believe in this. And I think the white part is kind of key there too, that there is an aspect here that Christian nationalism is in many ways white supremacy. And if we look around at America, the places with the highest Christian nationalists also align with the highest amounts of unemployment and poverty and infant mortality and maternal death and teen pregnancy and terrible education system. It's hard not to see, to your point about the Democrats getting it together, that the Republican Party has been preying on the poor and the uneducated for years and giving them a lower quality of life while telling them to wait for the afterlife where their faith will be rewarded. Whereas we need to offer them something good in this life that they believe in and that we can show them. I often say we can't tell them, we must show them that their lives can be better here. But the Republican Party has been really taking advantage of the faith of these people for years. And I think we have to offer an alternative that would actually bring things back around to a world where they could believe in that was still here on earth and they weren't waiting for the rapture.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And frankly, this is slaveholder attitudes, right? This is what white and Christian enslavers told their black enslaved is that, oh, well, you know what? Yeah, you're a Christian now. So in the afterlife, it's going to be fine. But while you're on earth, you have to be enslaved. Sorry. It's the same attitude here. Hey, I'm sorry your life sucks, but don't worry. Heaven is your reward one day. And it has to be defeated. It has to be shown that we live in the world's wealthiest country. There's no damn reason we can't get affordable healthcare taken care of. There's no reason we can't get livable wages, paid family leave. But if we can bomb countries on a whim, whenever we want, at the tune of billions of dollars per missile, certainly we can figure out affordable healthcare. It's a choice. We're not being forced into it, right? I think the more we have that kind of messaging and inviting people into a better way of being that shows them how their life is being screwed over, not by the immigrant, not by their trans neighbor, right? But by the billionaire class, by the people who are profiting off of killing other people and off of their own way of living with, debt systems and everything. The more we can have that messaging of like, it doesn't have to be this way, the better off we're going to be. And I also will say, and again, this is not everyone's job, we cannot forget the faith element. Whether we like it or not, a lot of people are spiritual. They have some element of faith. They have a belief in a higher power. Because we live in a pretty Christianized society, usually it's somewhere in the Christian tradition, that language is important. We have to be able to wrap some of this stuff up in the language of theology or the language of faith. It's very appealing to people. And I think unintentionally, as much as I am a secularist, especially when it comes to government, we can alienate a lot of people when we don't mention our personal beliefs or faith in our content.
Right. That's probably why someone like James Tellerico in Texas is getting people to respond.
Yeah. I've had the pleasure of interviewing him twice, once in person. And he's fantastic because he talks like a bro-evangelical would, only all of his policies are universal health care and for non-dehumanization, but he uses the Bible. Who would have thought?
Almost the way Jesus would be.
Almost. He's so close, right?
So close. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Please tell people how they can follow your work moving forward, because I love following your work, because you're right. There are so many people who are people of faith, and you can't discredit that, but we do need to be able to counter the people who are using faith to go all the way to Christian nationalism or white supremacy.
Well, as the queen of CNN, I'm honored. I see all of the gifts that get made. I'm like, yes, my energy. So that means a lot. People can follow me at Tim Whitaker Speaks on YouTube, on Substack, and on Instagram. I also started an organization called the New Evangelicals, now led by Melinda Hale. That's a great free resource for people who want to find a better path forward in their Christian faith. Everything we offer there is free. There's podcasts like the New Evangelicals podcast, Tim and April Show, Advocacy Hour. And we do free classes with top tier scholars, helping you understand the Bible in much more liberating ways.
That's wonderful. And that's exactly what we need to be doing, because it's not that we need to abandon our faith. It's that we need to be able to incorporate our faith into a world that's better for all of us.
Can I tell you a secret?
I would love a secret.
I am more of a radical Christian now than I was as an evangelical. I'm more extreme because I'm that much more committed to following Jesus. It's amazing what happens when you read those red letters and think to myself, wait, if Jesus teaches me to take care of the sick and we can afford universal health care, why wouldn't we do that? It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Crazy. I know.
Nice to see you, Tim. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for seeing me. I appreciate it.
So that was Tim Whitaker reminding us that bad theology kills. And these religious extremists are no longer fringe. They are the decision makers at the highest levels of government, those with the ear of the president, a combination of true believers and opportunists who will do what they want and take what they can under the guise of God's will to serve their own. But this doesn't mean we can just discredit those who believe. In fact, we would be well off to remember how many people build their lives around their faith. So when we speak to them, we should be open to wrapping our secular laws in words that will resonate, so that those who might fall prey to Christian nationalism but are really followers of Jesus hear the truth rather than the propaganda. At the end of the day, we have to do better than this. Our country and the world at large are in real danger from this extremist theology, and we simply can't allow these people to take over without a real fight. I want to thank Tim for joining us today, and you for caring enough about our nation to be here. Until next week, PG out. Before you go, I just want to say this far-right media universe led by these Christian nationalists or Christian Zionists are the perfect example of why we need to fund independent media. Mainstream media, cable news, and social media are now almost exclusively run by a handful of Trump-supporting billionaires or religious extremists. So if you respect what I am trying to do here, if you learn something from my podcasts and rants, if you would like to get this podcast ad-free delivered directly to your inbox along with my kitchen rants and TV appearances, then please consider becoming a member of PoliticsGirl Premium by going to PoliticsGirl.com and signing up. If you are already a premium member of this podcast, thank you for your support. And if you're not a member, please consider becoming a patron of my work. If you want real knowledge in a world of lies, it is essential to support those of us out here still trying to bring it to you. There is a link to sign up in the bio of this episode, but also at PoliticsGirl.com. And as always, please like and share this podcast so we can grow our audience, because the more people who have access to this kind of information, the better. As always, thank you so much for your time and support. The Politics Girl podcast is written and performed by me, Lee McGowan, and produced and edited by Happy Warrior Entertainment. All rights reserved.